Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I am here with Alison DeLapp, who is the executive director of the Overland Expo Foundation, which is an incredible organization that we're going to talk about a little bit more as the podcast goes on. But before you started that, you are one of the most prolific travelers in this segment, and you've spent years living, traveling, adventuring in South America and other places around the world. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And a special thanks to Moon Fabrications for supporting this week's podcast. Moonshade by Moon Fabrications is the portable vehicle awning you've been waiting for. Moonshade is built to last, simple to set up, and ships with everything you need to mount the Moonshade to most vehicle styles without a drill right out of the box. With over 60 square feet of shade coverage and multiple setup configurations, Moonshade is the ideal choice for rigs of all sizes. Moonshade only weighs 8 pounds and shrinks down to the size of a yoga mat, so you can pack more of what you need out on the trail. Visit moonfab.com. That's MOONFAB.com to place your order today. For the worst summer sun, treat yourself to the best. Moonshade has you covered. Thanks, Moonshade. What I'd love to do is kind of paint the picture of how you got to the point of being the executive director of the foundation and what you learned about your travel. So talk a little bit about where you've traveled in the world.
Let's see. I started traveling in Los Angeles, or I should say as a starting point in Los Angeles.
Is that where you were born?
In Southern California,
okay.
Yeah. And I lived and worked in Los Angeles for a long time in the entertainment industry. And so I had my summers free. And so I would take 2-3 months off. I traveled around the Southwest first. And then that's when it finally started where it's like, okay, I got to keep doing this. And then the next summer it was up to Alaska and back. And then the summer after that, it was like, okay, I'm
broken now. Yeah, exactly.
Like I just need to keep going. And it just made sense to continue south. And I ended up packing everything up, leaving Los Angeles, and basically for 6 months traveled through Central America and then down to South America to Argentina.
When you were traveling in the desert Southwest, was that on motorcycle or did you travel by other means? What was your first bike? What was the first motorcycle that you traveled on?
A KLR 650.
Perfect.
It was wonderful.
They're amazing.
I could fix it anywhere. That's the main reason why I chose that bike. It doesn't do anything well. It's heavy, it's cumbersome, but it gets you there.
I've always called it like the Land Cruiser of adventure bikes because they're so reliable. They're ubiquitous. They're around the world. They're easy to work on. Big fuel tank.
Big fuel tank, yes, which comes in handy during some of the trips or some of the roads in South America.
Does. Yeah. So at what point in your Southwest travels did you realize, like, I want to go further afield? Or was it a moment or was it like it just kept building?
It was actually an interaction I had with a couple in Wyoming that had asked me, they were just curious where I was, around the Southwest had been interesting because a lot of people stopped and they wanted to know, one, was I solo traveling? Like, how did I feel safe? The number one question I got was I packing? And I was like, yeah, I packed my clothes.
Exactly. Exactly. What am I going to do? Am I going to get a shootout in the middle of the desert? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I was having this wonderful conversation with this couple, and they were like, oh, well, have you been up to Alaska? And it was just like, no, I haven't. They're like, you should go next summer. And it was like, okay, well, why not?
Yeah.
And so that's just, it ends up just being conversations with other travelers along the way that make that little spark happen, and then you're on your next trip.
So it planted the seed of, I'm going to go to this place. Now, how was Alaska? How long did you take to do that?
It was, let's see, in the summer, I actually left very late. So I left on the trip late August. So I was in Alaska during September.
Okay.
And the reason why I think that's the most beautiful time is, one, all of the summer travelers are heading south.
Right.
So it's pretty vacant. There's no mosquitoes, and the fall foliage is starting to come in.
It pops.
Yeah. So it's just beautiful time of year. It did snow once, but it was like 65-degree days most of the time, and then just a few chilly at night, but could easily find campsites, easily accessible to everything except for gas.
Yeah, that can be a challenge.
The rule is anywhere you see an open gas station, get gas.
Go ahead and fill up.
Yeah.
Now, did you take the Alcan up, or did you take the Casier, or did you hop on the ferry?
I hopped on the ferry going, see, what did I do? I took the Casuar all the way up, and then I hopped on the ferry coming back because I needed a rest.
Yeah, I really liked the Casuar. It was a nice departure from the Alcan. And it was actually some locals that, I mean, I remember when I did one of my first trips, went up the Alcan, and I just figured I'd be going back down the Alcan. They said, why wouldn't you take the Casuar? And I look on the map, and it was amazing.
It was beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah, very, very beautiful. And lightly traveled.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then where did you travel in Alaska? Did you go to Denali, or did you go up to Prudhoe Bay, or?
Went to Denali. The intention was originally to go to Prudhoe Bay, but because I left so late in the season, the roads were starting to ice over.
No doubt.
And luckily I met some other travelers that had just had to turn around because they were on motorcycles and they weren't able to get all the way to Prudhoe Bay.
Yeah, it can very quickly turn challenging for a bike.
Yeah, and
unless you've got studs on the tires, but
yeah, wasn't putting studs on the
Yeah,
tires,
sure.
and I really didn't want to pick up the bike that many times.
yeah, that makes sense. Well, for a future trip, maybe you'll go do that, finish it up.
Yeah.
So then you do Alaska, and how is that starting to change your perceptions of travel now that you've done this longer trip?
It's infectious.
Mm.
It kind of just gave meaning. It was also an interesting time in my life of just like rediscovering independence and wanting to know that I could just do things for myself.
Sure.
And
what a proof of that. Like, I'm going to Alaska. That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. And I met, I met some other female, not necessarily riders, but just other female travelers that it was like, it kind of sparked to them as well that like, oh, they can do a motorized type of travel and still be self-sufficient and be okay.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So you finish up Alaska, and now you're still working in the entertainment industry, or at what point did you start to decouple from that, from like that 9 to 5 in a way?
Luckily I was freelance.
Sure.
Very long days, but that allowed for, freedom at other times. And I think when I started traveling, it was probably when it was like, okay, like how do I get out of Los Angeles as like a final departure? It never fully my city. It's really busy and congested, and I loved the motorcycle roads around there because you could be
great.
to the desert, to the ocean, or to the mountains within an hour. And I do miss that part of it, but I didn't miss the hustle and bustle of the life, and I wanted to just experience something that was more than the everyday life in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I grew up there. I grew up in Sherman
right.
Oaks. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of traffic. It's very difficult to do much, and just to maintain connections because it's an hour to go 10 miles. And so I never really felt like it was home for me. When I left, I decided I was never coming back.
Yeah, there's that final moment.
So you leave Southern California, and is that when you left on your trip through Central America?
Mm-hmm. So that's when I packed everything up.
Same KLR?
Same
Awesome.
KLR.
That's so
Yep.
great. You still have it?
I don't. I actually sold it in Punta Arenas, Chile.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, we'll get to that. That's good. Okay, so you start heading south.
Yeah, so I start heading south. I met up with a few other riders at a Horizons Unlimited event. It was one of those like, okay, like we all kind of put out feelers like, do you want to cross the border together? Because it was all 5 of us solo travelers. And we're just like, we need to push each other to just make that first step of going to that foreign country.
Keep going.
Yeah, traveling around the Southwest, going up to Alaska through Canada, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. But like, even though the Tijuana border was closer, in proximity, that seemed like the bigger deal to actually get going. And so it was probably like a week after we returned home from the event that somebody put out a text of like, are we doing this or not? Because everybody was just waiting for everybody else. Like,
sure.
I don't know, are we going to do this? And so we ended up meeting down at the gas station right before the border and crossed together. And
Did you cross at Tecate or in Tijuana?
In Tijuana.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. We just rode around for maybe like all of Baja, crossed over to the mainland, and probably rode around for maybe 10, 14 days together. And then that was about the time where we kind of worked out the kinks.
Sure.
In our, in our riding patterns and just what each of us needed, and then we kind of went our separate ways.
And did you feel like that you were looking forward to breaking off on your own, or were you starting to enjoy the camaraderie of a group? What was your feeling at that point?
That's a very good question. So being the only female in a group of 5 guys, there was a little bit of big brotherness, I'll call it.
Sure.
And so, a couple guys would go off on their own, and it was the idea we'll meet up with them later. And, one other guy took off, but there was always one guy who seemed to want to like be I don't know, make sure that I was okay and wanted to travel with me, make sure that, we all got to the same location. And
sure.
And so it was, I think, finally a point where I was just like, I just need to be by myself for a while. And I woke up at 6 a.m. Before everybody else was awake, and I just wrote a little note like,
perfect,
I'll see you guys later.
Bye, Felicia.
I gotta go. So I wanted to just experience that for myself. I've always been a solo traveler, and and that's what this trip was about for me. So
what was your defining solo travels before that? I mean, were they not motorcycle related? Were you traveling, just internationally? Or when you talk about yourself being a solo traveler, what were some of the bigger solo travels that you did before this trip to Central America?
Just the motorcycle.
Got it.
Travels.
I see. That's what you're saying. Sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of what sparked all of it.
And what were some of the highlights for you in Mexico? What did you really like?
Oh, Oaxaca was amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah. The food is amazing there. The people were wonderful. We were actually trying to make it to Oaxaca for Dia de los Muertos because it lined up and it was just too much riding. We couldn't get there. So we ended up going to this one town kind of nearby, Zacatapa, I think it is. Okay. And they had this just cute little town celebration of Dia de los Muertos. And it felt like so intimate to just be a part of that rather than the huge one in Oaxaca. And I still would love to go visit that one day. But
were they all just hanging out, having lunch in the cemetery, and you can see that? It's just amazing.
The towns were covered in the marigold petal designs, and so just being able to walk around that with everything lit up with candles, and it almost looked like a prom, like a Dia de los Muertos prom, where everybody was in like full skeleton makeup and
amazing,
like full fancy outfits, and it was just wonderful to be able to experience that.
Well, and you're a photographer, and for those that are listening, Alison has a photography book. What's the name of the book that's mostly photography? It's one of your more
Chaos
recent.
and Harmony.
That's it. So when you think about your travels as a photographer, what are you trying to capture? Are you trying to capture your own memories, or are you looking for fine art? Talk a little bit about your photography.
I think it was a little bit of both. Like I was trying to capture what I was feeling on the road. Like sometimes it was just like jammed on a bridge where it was just kind of this overwhelming feeling of how do I even get out of here, because there are so many people around me, to like these wide expanses and just following the curves of the road as lines on paper. Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of share.
So you were looking, to kind of give it from your bird's eye, because so many people will do that. It'll be like the point of view photograph, and for others, it's the photograph of them in the environment. They like the selfie that we see now so often. But that's what I liked about your images, is it gave the sense that I was there, and I thought that was really strong.
Thank you.
So it was really great. So you leave Mexico, and where did you go next?
Let's see, Mexico, and then through Guatemala, Honduras. I skipped El Salvador, going down to Costa Rica, and then Panama before catching the boat. And the one thing I'll say about kind of traveling that route that I found very funny was in talking with locals, especially in Mexico, they were asking, where are you going next? And so I'd say Guatemala. And they're just like, oh, no,
No,
it's
it's
so
super dangerous.
dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so dangerous. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, well, have you been there? They're like, no, we wouldn't dare.
Yeah.
They're just be careful. So then it was Guatemala. They were like, oh, no, you're going to Honduras. Like, be careful, be careful. And so it was just funny that every single country, they were just scared of their neighbors. And so, I said, well, how do Canadians think?
Yeah.
Bringing that full circle of
That's true.
what's in the media. And
Did you ever ask them what they thought about Canada?
I will next time.
That'd be funny to flip the script the whole other. Do you think Canada's dangerous?
Yeah.
That'd be really interesting. Now, what year was this that you did that trip?
So this is 2011, 2012.
Okay.
No, excuse me, 2012, 2013.
Okay. So then you make it all the way down to Panama.
Mm-hmm.
And did you already know that you were going to go to South America, or you had not decided yet?
Yes, I knew I was going to South America, and there was a limited time going through Central America because I needed to catch the Stallrat.
Oh, and that's the sailboat. Mm-hmm. Got it. How was that experience?
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. So
I love the sailing thing. So
yeah, of just riding right up to the dock and watching them with ropes just hoist your bike over the side, and you're like, I just really hope it doesn't drop into the ocean because that's the end of it. But I mean, they've done it so many times that they know what they're doing, and they put it on board, and it was, I think, 4 days, something like that, to get down to Colombia. And
how big of a boat is that?
I don't remember.
I mean, do you remember how many people were on board?
Let's see, there were, I want to say 12 motorcyclists.
Oh, that's a lot. So it's a big boat.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of lashed to the foredeck, or
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, they're just lashed to the railings and covered with tarps.
Yeah,
And
that's
that was it.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then what did you think about that experience being on the boat?
I loved it because it's one of those kind of pinch points in the trip where you get to meet a lot of travelers.
Sure.
Because there's only so few ways to cross the Darien Gap, and so get to kind of exchange information with these people, and where are you going next? Where are you going? And form other little pods of or travel groups, I should say. Once you get off the boat, some people went into Venezuela, which I did, and then other people went into, just down to Colombia and south because they had limited time.
So where did you land with the sailboat?
Cartagena.
Okay, so then you took off, and you're like, I'm going east to Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, at that time, you would have still been able to get in. Around that time, I tried to get a visa, and I couldn't even get a visa. Being prior military, they wouldn't let me go.
It was an interesting time being in Venezuela. I'll just say that much because it was right after Chavez died, and so Maduro was.
I think that's the name. Yeah.
Trying to get elected.
Right.
And yeah, you could just see the struggles that were starting with everybody there. And I mean, they say gas is cheap. Gas was so cheap, but actually getting gas was very difficult. And so it was the kindness of Venezuelans that actually allowed me to get gas.
Amazing.
Because you had to have certain credentials in order to actually go up to the pump. And so some people would just, motion me over and let me use their, their time at the pump, so to speak.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what else were your takeaways from Venezuela on a bike? How was that?
It was beautiful. Yeah. It was.
What was the highlight? What was the location that you went to that you really loved?
Let's see. Well, I'll admit that we didn't get as far as we wanted to because the police on the road, they basically kind of, at checkpoints, they did stop us and say that it wasn't safe to go on ahead. And so we were turned around several times. And so it's it was one of those things we just didn't really want to test.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah.
They could actually be very well informed, and it's going to be a problem. So then you head back into Colombia. Mm-hmm. What were the highlights of Colombia for you?
My memories are deceiving me because I lived in Panama and Colombia for a time. And so I'm trying to remember which ones were which.
I see.
But traveling through Colombia, I mean, the people were just amazing.
They are amazing there. Yeah.
I believe I went to Medellin.
Beautiful city.
Yeah. I loved just all the art.
So is
that
Bogota.
was there. Yeah.
Like just like to go out at 2 in the morning and like there's families out and about. I mean, that's how you always know a place is safe because there's kids running around and it's great.
And that's just it. It was just anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
Like I really just loved the kind of very upfront culture.
Yeah.
That it was.
And great food and like you can find an excellent cappuccino and like it's surprise. I mean, for those that are listening, we were programmed for so long to view Colombia in a certain way, and it is not that country anymore. I mean, it is very modern, very safe, but it still has these fantastic back roads, like the twistiest asphalt that's super fun on a motorcycle, or the most challenging dirt track, but then you can stay in a great hotel and have a great meal at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really special there.
Fast forwarding a few years for when I traveled there a second time on motorcycle, I probably should. This is one of those moments where I should have stopped because the sun was setting and we were, just passing through a town. We're like, no, let's just go a little bit further, and it's turned into a dirt road. And we thought, oh, it might just be a few miles. No, it actually ended up being switchbacks along a mountain with lorries coming the other direction, unable to see around the other side. And I didn't know this was the trampoline of death, was what it's called. It's called the Colombian Death Road.
Yeah. And I was I almost got killed on that road, but it was by this guy from Idaho. He was like in his Ford full-size truck with a camper, and he comes, and I'm on a BMW, and I come around the corner slowly, and he's flying up the hill because he's afraid he's going to lose traction or whatever, and he sees me, and his eyes are this big around, and he comes, and he's like, I'm so sorry, and I'm like, it's no problem, and he stops, and he's like, because of course I answered in English, so, but I just remember the license plate like sticking out in my mind of like this Idaho plate and this giant full-size truck nearly running me off the road. But that's a great road.
It is a great road. I ended up doing it at night, and there was part of me
I did not do it at night.
Really wished that I had done it during the day, but I have a fear of heights, and so part of me was very glad that I did it at night and didn't know what kind of drop off was on the other side.
Maybe it was just what it was supposed to be.
Yep.
Now, when you were in that area, did you get into the Tatacoa Desert at all?
Oh, yes.
It's amazing.
Love that.
People don't even know that it's there.
Yeah. No, going up into that area and then continuing further all the way up into the northernmost point of South America along the
Wajida Peninsula? Right?
Yes, thank you. It was just gorgeous.
Awesome.
Not traveled to nearly enough.
Yeah, it's so great. So great. So then you make it all the way down to Ushuaia. Along the way, for me, I did a motorcycle trip, kind of like yours, where I started off with a group of people and then I split off and I go down to Lima by myself over the Andes and then kind of make my way back up to Colombia. And it ended up being personally like very transformative, changed a couple different directions in my life. When you're traveling solo, what are you realizing about yourself? How are you seeing yourself start to change because of these interactions and these experiences?
It's very enriching. Like it beyond just this realization that as a female, I can do this myself. I think what had the most impact was meeting other young women along the way that don't have as many opportunities as I do here in the U.S. And you can kind of see it in their eyes, like when I take my helmet off, that, oh my goodness, you're a woman and you're doing this. Like maybe there is something more than just this life that's set out for me.
I see.
And so that was really just a powerful experience for me, meeting a lot of the locals, and also the kindness of locals.
It's incredible.
Being a solo traveler, especially compared to traveling with a partner, you're seen as what's the right word for it? Not defenseless, but
you're more exposed as a solo traveler.
You're more exposed and you're less intimidating.
Sure.
And so more people come up to you and want to know what it's all about. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? I was invited into many people's homes, whether it was just for dinner or they had an extra bed for me to sleep in.
Sure.
And you can tell from just how they approach you, like they want to give as much as they can. And usually they have way less than we have here in the US.
Sure.
But their priorities are about family and taking care of their community. And so even if you're just momentarily entering their community and then passing through, like they're kind of welcoming you.
Yeah, it feels like as a solo traveler, especially on a motorcycle, you take the helmet off and they see that you're all alone. And there's just something that for some people, it will draw them to you to figure out, why are you here? Why are you all alone? Or maybe they feel like you might be lonely or you might need help. It's impressive.
I remember this one time in Chile. So actually one of the riders I met on the Stall Rat, I ended up meeting up with her farther south, and we ended up traveling together in Chile for a while. And so we, long days since it was summertime down there, and so we could just ride and ride and ride. And so we were needing to find a spot at the end of the day, and found this one. It was a campsite, but it had closed because it was not quite. It was the off season, and so went up to the house and asked the woman, like, "Hey, we're just staying here for the night. Do you mind if we camp out?" And she was like, "Sure. Like, are you alone?" And I was like, "No, I'm with, another woman." And she didn't believe me. And so she and her two sisters and her, brother and her, brother's brother, like they all came down to see us at the campsite, and they were just like, "Oh my goodness, like it's two women. Like this is not your boyfriend. You're not lying. Like this is just, why are you doing this all by yourself?" And so it was just like this such a heartfelt, night just to spend it with them and try to explain in broken English and broken Spanish about our travels and have, try to have this conversation. It was really
and maybe wonderful. That is that opportunity to show them that something else is possible. Even if it's minor.
Yeah.
That it could change the course of them and their future generations.
Yeah. The young kids that could grow up.
No question, see that anything is possible.
Yeah.
And a special thanks to this week's sponsor, Gci Outdoor. Whether you're heading out for a weekend of adventure in the woods or to your backyard fire pit, Gci Outdoor gear is ready for whatever you have planned. Gci Outdoor has been around for 25 years, so they know what they're doing when it comes to the best in portable recreation gear. Gci has innovative products ranging from outdoor rockers to complete camp kitchens and everything in between. And with a limited lifetime warranty, they stand behind everything they make. Gci Outdoor gear is comfortable, durable, and built for adventures, big and small. Try them out for yourself. Head over to their website at gcioutdoor.com and save 10% off your first purchase when you sign up for their email list. Thanks again, Gci. What else did you find? Did you find that you were starting to think about, how do I begin to maybe write your first book, or what was starting to incubate in your mind around that?
I had the idea to do a photography book before I left. I had kind of set up a Kickstarter back in the day as a way just to see, to gauge interest for it and see if anybody, would like to know about it. And so I had it in the back of my mind while I was traveling. And I honestly kind of wish I hadn't, because it ended up making things feel a little bit like work, because I worked in the photo industry, and then having to take pictures during my trip, it almost felt like it took a little bit away from where I needed to be in my headspace that needed to be focusing on the trip.
Sure.
I'm really glad I did it so that I have something to look back on.
Right.
And I think I kind of had to come to terms with that after I came back, though.
That makes sense. And have you since been able to do that trip where it was just for yourself?
Actually, yes. So after I returned from South America, I ended up being in the U.S. for a little bit, and then I moved to Panama and lived in Colombia and for a little bit. And then when I returned to the U.S., I was still wanting to travel by motorcycle. And so I ended up continuing to travel by motorcycle for several months until I found a spot that I wanted to settle down in.
Oh, that's great. So you were not only getting a chance to travel, but also look for where your home might be. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fun.
Because I was determined not to return to Los Angeles.
Not going back. Yeah,
Not going
that's
back.
great. Yeah. I think that was kind of how I ended up in Prescott. I just kept driving around until I thought, this is just the right distance to all the things that I want to go see. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of how I ended up there. So you make it all the way down to Ushuaia, and did you ship back at that point, or did you sell the bike?
So I, being the kind of minimalist traveler that I was, I had enough funds to get me down to the tip of Argentina. And then I needed to sell a bike basically to buy a plane ticket back home.
That's amazing.
So I walked into a deal at that point, where it was actually a group of lawyers who wanted to start a motorcycle riding club who wanted to buy motorcycles. And so I think 3 or 4 of us from the group ended up selling our motorcycles to them.
Incredible.
And, so that they could, have outfitted motorcycles down there, because that just having motorcycles in general, I think was very difficult to get down there.
One of the things that I loved about Ushuaia, it was one of those things in my travels that kind of surprised me, is that I always felt like Ushuaia is going to be the Star Wars bar at the end of the road. It was going to be this dusty little town. It's the end of the world. It's going to be, but it's not. There's like coffee shops and like a nice airport and
and wonderful restaurants.
Totally.
Nice
nice hotels.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, I mean, the steaks in Argentina are unbelievable.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be. Actually, I won't call him out on the podcast, but there's a motorcycle rider that I know that is a vegetarian, and he actually decided to stop being a vegetarian in Argentina. It's the truth. First of all, he couldn't really find many options as a vegetarian, but he's like, if I'm gonna stop for a while, that's the place to do it.
I mean, it's funny you say that. So when I was living in Los Angeles, I was mostly vegetarian.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do the South America trip, I have to start introducing meat little by little.
Sure.
Because it's the majority of what they
It's true.
eat down there.
Yeah, it's hard to find. I mean, if someone was a pescatarian, you could probably get away with it, have more fish, but you can't always find fish. Sometimes those little roadside stand, they have one thing that they do well, like it's chicken that day or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so that was pretty interesting. And he's like, it was kind of amazing. And then he went back to being a vegetarian.
Exactly.
So, which is great. So, I mean, he adapted to what he needed to do. So you come back to the U.S. and then you decide to go back. So what made you decide to go back to South America a second time as opposed to going to someplace else in the world?
A man.
Okay.
Wow.
Love can make us do crazy things.
Oh, love does make us do crazy things. I met somebody at the end of my trip, and so he was a Colombian living in Panama, and I ended up moving down to Panama for a while, and we were, planning to take a big trip and started out, and then things didn't work out, and I returned to the U.S.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, what a great way to figure out it's going to work out or not.
Yeah.
Go do a trip together.
Exactly. You got to travel well together.
No question. Yeah. So you can shorten that whole learning process, figure it out in a hurry. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So after that, you started to get involved with the Overland Expo.
Oh, actually, while. So
still while you were traveling.
Yeah. So I returned from my trip in 2013, and then I ended up starting to work for Overland Expo at the end of 2013.
Okay. And then what was your first role with Overland Expo?
I came on as logistics manager.
Okay.
So just kind of helping Roseanne out with anything and everything that she needed help with.
A big event. How do you manage it? Sure. No question. And then did you start to do any other travels during that period of time? Were you able to take breaks? Because at the time there was only 1 or 2 events, so it was easier to get breaks away. Were there other places that you decided to travel?
Mostly traveled around Panama.
Okay,
at that
nice.
point. Yeah. Because this was actually when we started the show, the East Show.
Sure.
And so it was kind of building up for every 6 months, and it was, a nice, I don't know what I'm going to say. It was
Yeah, like a nice little break.
Yeah.
To be able to go and do some travel for
Yeah.
sure. And then now your role has changed, and you're now the executive director of the Overland Expo Foundation. So let's talk about what inspired that to happen.
So starting out as logistics manager in 2013, then as Overland Expo grew and as the events grew, it kind of took on more and more responsibilities. So that's where I started to, or became assistant director to Roseanne and took on more responsibilities producing the events. And then when Lodestone bought the events, took on kind of director of operations just to continue what Roseanne was doing.
Sure.
And so it just wore many hats within this organization.
Yeah, small business, you
Yes.
do.
And so it's just grown beyond, and our staff has grown beyond as well. So when they said that they needed somebody to kind of head up the foundation, I was very happy to step into that role.
To make that shift.
Yeah.
Well, it might allow you to go travel more, or it sounds like you've got other adventures that have been coming into your life. So
yes.
So now you're the executive director of the foundation. So let's talk about what is the Overland Expo Foundation? What is its mission? And then let's get into what you're doing right now to make a difference.
Okay. So the Overland Expo Foundation was founded in 2020. Because 2020 was such the year it was.
It was.
We really have only started getting things rolling within the past year. And so the main goal is to, or the main mission, I should say, is to give back to the Overland Expo community, because it's the community that has really made the events so wonderful. And so this is kind of our way of showing how we can do good with the community. And so most of what the foundation is here to support are individuals and organizations that protect protect access to public lands or to improve public lands. We're looking for organizations that help foster education around how to overland responsibly.
Sure.
And just create a more conscientious community about keeping overlanding, I don't want to say alive.
It might be, though, that it's alive, because as we grow, as the organization has grown, as the community has grown, our impact has grown.
It has.
So if we don't educate people about how to minimize their impact, leave no trace, tread lightly, all of these things that are really foundational and they're important. I mean, just Moab recently shut down camping. Sedona has shut down camping in huge swaths of land because the amount of human waste and trash made it impossible for them to keep up or for the land to sustain it. So as places start to close down, it'll concentrate that impact in other places, and then those will close down. So if we don't stop it now with efforts like yours, I think that we're in trouble. I think it could be, does overlanding stay alive in North America if we don't start taking some responsibility for packing out all of our stuff, including our poop and everything else. So
it's probably the one thing people don't want to talk about, but it's the one thing we do need to talk about.
That's right.
Because it has the most impact on the environment.
It does. And if you go with the other one that I feel strongly about is group size. I would say that it's fairly irresponsible to go out with a group of 15 to 20 people, or 15 to 20 cars, because most campsites are not meant for that size of a group. When you look at campgrounds that have been around for a long time, especially remote camps, at most they're going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 vehicles. So in my mind, if we can reduce the group size first, that automatically starts to reduce the impact to the campsites. We don't get the campsites growing, destroying flora and fauna. I mean, the fauna are impacted because now there's a lot more noise and there's a lot more left behind. Maybe there's food scraps, too many food scraps left behind. It starts to have an impact on the animals as well. But if we can start by minimizing group sizes. So I just really believe it's important for people to not have groups bigger than 5 cars.
And kind of along the same lines, one thing that we're trying to also just encourage is people not to share their location on social media.
Sure.
Where you can share pictures, whatnot, anything about the trip, but just not the exact location that you've taken hours exploring to go find this beautiful area in the backcountry. And if you share the location, then it just invites more use, and it's not sustainable for that area, because it's the same thing where it has too much impact and these areas aren't set up for that much use.
How would you recommend then someone share their experience? Would they just talk about a region? So if they were in Moab area, they would just say Moab, Utah.
Yeah.
So it's super general, but kind of gives you a sense for where they're at on the planet.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
minus the GPS points where it's like, come to this campsite.
Yeah.
Because there's just been, especially during these past few years where more people are traveling domestically, there has been more use in these areas, and which just creates more trash. And as you said, more human waste, and just the ecosystem is not set up properly for it.
And that's part of our responsibility, is to preserve this stuff for future generations. So that way, someone that's 10, 15 years old that's excited to go to be an overlander someday and do their own travels, that they actually get a chance to do it. This content is brought to you by Overland Journal, our premium quality print publication. The magazine was founded in 2006 with the goal of providing independent equipment and vehicle reviews, along with the most stunning adventures and photography. We care deeply about the countries and cultures we visit and share our experiences freely with our readers. We also have zero advertorial policy and do not accept any advertiser compensation for our reviews. By subscribing to Overland Journal, you're helping to support our employee-owned and veteran-owned publication. Your support also provides resources and funding for content like you are watching or listening to right now. You can subscribe directly on our website at overlandjournal.com. So let's talk specifically about some of the ways that you're helping to facilitate that.
Our main grant that we offer for the Overland Expo Foundation grant is set up so that we want to fund organizations that have upcoming projects, be it trash removal or restoration, or just something to kind of take care of a local area. So our first grantee that we just worked with was Natural Restorations.
Not heard of them.
Based in Arizona.
Okay,
and so
nice.
They just replanted, and this is an ongoing project for them, but the burn scar in the Tonto National Forest, the bushfire burn scar in the Tonto National Forest, which is kind of Lower Peaks, Sycamore area. They basically they rescue these cacti that are going to be destroyed from construction projects, and then they bring them to the burn scar and do a replanting. And so they actually have a core veteran-based team that does a lot of the work. And then during like the 2 weeks that we helped fund, they had a volunteer event as well. So 87 volunteers came out to kind of help put the cacti in the ground, give them water, throw some wildflower seed, approved wildflower seed into the air, take out some of the buffel grass, if I'm saying that correctly, which is
non-native, maybe.
It's invasive, and it it's kindling essentially for fires. So they have been just improving the backcountry, or I shouldn't say the backcountry. They've been improving the areas that overlanders visit.
Sure.
So that.
Well, and just to give a acknowledgement to one of the first big projects I ever saw successful in that, Tim Huber. And Tim, when I first met him, this was back when Expedition Portal first started, but he decided that he was going to do this huge cleanup out in Four Peaks. So it's just absolutely amazing the amount of trash that dumpsters full of trash that we hauled out of there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they. If you look on the stats for natural restorations, I mean, it's something like millions of pounds of trash a year that they remove.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's amazing.
So, how do people get involved to help? I mean, I'm sure that they can donate maybe some funds or donate to those locations or organizations. How do they help?
Well, there's a few ways to kind of get involved. They can apply for any of the grants that we offer. The Overland Expo Foundation grant is just one of the 4 ways that people can get involved. You can volunteer with any of the organizations that we work with, or you can, we are also looking for ambassadors to come on kind of behalf of the Overland Expo Foundation and to help us out, to kind of volunteer at live events, or we need some year-round help as well.
Is that on the so if someone was to go to overlandexpo.com, is that how they find it? Or is it they go to overlandexpofoundation.org, or what's the...
So overlandexpofoundation.org.
Got it. Perfect.
They can apply for any of these grants.
Amazing. And so what would you say is your biggest need today? Like if we could catalyze our listenership, like how can we help you and what you're doing right now? What's the biggest need that you have?
So I guess there's a few. One of the programs that we're trying to kick off this year is the Leave the Trail Better program, or Leave the Trail Better mini grant. And it's kind of our way of wanting the community to also be involved, because it's the main thing that I hear about with all of these organizations that have been talking to, it's trash is the number one problem in the backcountry. And it's going to be the number one cause to get things closed.
Sure.
And so if we want to continue to have access to all of these areas, we need to do our part. And even at some point, we actually need to do more than our part, because this is part of the educational process is whatever and this is a leave no trace principle originally, but the pack it in, pack it out.
Sure.
And so we're kind of encouraging, pack it in, pack it out, and then some, because there's always trash, in any campsite that we've been to. And so I guess, so the Leave the Trail Better mini grants, we are kind of offering to sort of, like if you know that you're going out into the trail, on a trail ride for the weekend, to just, contact us. And if are willing to pick up trash along the way, then we're willing to kind of pay for up to $500 of the costs to cover, trash bags, gloves, any kind of materials that you need for trash pickup, as well as, food and beverages
Fantastic.
to kind of help out, since, people are putting in their time and energy. And we would love to just get more people from the community involved and make this kind of part of the lifestyle.
Sure.
Of like just
being good stewards.
Yeah, being good stewards.
Oh, that's fantastic. How else do people find? Do you guys have a social media presence yet for the?
We do, yeah.
Okay, so how do people find that?
You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Overland Expo Foundation.
Okay, and then how do people find out more about you and your travels? If you'd like people to know more about you and your travels.
I've kind of taken a step back.
Okay.
From
less of the social media. I like that.
Yeah, no, I'll let the foundation do social media.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, Alison, thank you so much for being on the podcast. So
thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Me.
Is there anything else that you would like to share? One of the things that we do like to ask is, do you have a favorite book, or do you have some book recommendations, travel books or anything else, something that's been really impactful for you, powerful for you? You could say Jupiter's Travels. Everybody else does. No, I'm kidding.
I know. Who did I read? Honestly, before my first trip, I think I read like Jack Kerouac.
Yeah,
on
he's
the
great.
road.
Yeah, he's great.
This was before I knew about motorcycle travelers.
Sure,
and
that's a great one.
And then getting into the whole motorcycle travel world kind of opened it up. But I think it was that.
That's a great one. Now, if you were to sit down and have coffee with someone who had a life very much like you did in Los Angeles, working in the entertainment industry, they're a solo traveler, and they want to go see the world, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Go and go slow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Because
love that.
Although I took 6 months and it seems like a long time, I probably should have traveled maybe a third of the distance.
Okay.
So that you can really like slow down, take in the culture, and just be in the environment and experience rather than rush through to the next.
I love it.
So savor the experience.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Or
So one program that's very near and dear to my heart that we just launched is the Change Your World Travel Grant. And so I'm very excited to share that in speaking with Roseanne and Jonathan Hansen, who the original founders of Overland Expo,
right.
They had created the Change Your World Fund back in 2016 to honor the memory of Alistair Farland, who
Correct.
was a traveler who came to Overland Expo East a few years prior to that. And so in discussing with them as we kind of got some programs started with the foundation, we are excited that we are now taking over the Change Your World ethos and carrying on that program.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so we are, if motorcycle or vehicle at this point that are going above and beyond the average overland journey, and kind of giving back to either doing some sort of stewardship project along the way, be it internationally, they can apply for a grant for up to $5,000 to
fantastic
help fund their travels, because we want to help them in their travels as they give back.
And then do you also provide some like technical support with you being so well traveled? Can you help these new travelers with logistics and advice and so that they can get support in leaving?
And if I can't specifically do it, then we have a good network of people who can help answer questions, especially depending on the countries that they're traveling to.
And then the Change Your World, they also find on the Overland Expo Foundation.org. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
That's an exciting one.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So we're excited to carry on that name. Go to our website, overlandexpofoundation.org, and see if anything sparks your interest, because we'd love to have more people involved with the foundation.
That sounds great. And we hope that everyone does. And we hope that all of you go and that you go slow. And we thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.